Today we come together to commemorate and acknowledge the Nakba of 1948. While the Nakba follows the Day of Independence, the Israelis celebrate, the Nakba, as I said, did not begin on May 15th, and it continues, unfortunately, to today. In some ways, the final chapter began in November of 1947, when the UN voted to recommend partitioning Palestine, which was a mandate territory after the First World War, into three areas. It would be a Jewish state, a Palestinian or Arab state, and an independent international area for Jerusalem. After much debate and intensive lobbying by the US and other countries, this was passed by the UN. Strife in Palestine grew worse after the vote because the UN had given 52% of the land of the mandate to a third of the population. Arab leaders throughout the region opposed the vote and encouraged Palestinians in the newly designated Jewish areas to stay put, retain their homes and lands, and work for a better solution. On December 3rd, 1947, so several weeks after the vote, David Ben-Gurion gave a speech in which he stated how the leadership viewed this, what they called unacceptable reality of the UN plan. Quote, "There are 40% non-Jews in the areas allocated to the Jewish state. This composition is not a solid basis for a Jewish state, and we have to face the new reality with all its severity and distinctness. Such a demographic balance questions our ability to maintain Jewish sovereignty. Only a state with at least 80% Jews is a viable state." In December, the tactic of terrorizing Palestinian villagers to leave was tested on villages such as Deir Ayyub, Beit Affa, Qissas, Lifta, and Balad al-Sheikh. In January, this strategy was turned toward the Haifa suburbs. In January also, some of the first Arab countries sent troops and soldiers to try to prevent partition and further attacks against Arab villages. Jewish terrorists were attacking Arab villages, and the Arabs then began retaliating and attacking Jewish settlements. As these attacks increased, the Zionist leadership worked together to develop a more cohesive plan that would unite the work of the terrorist groups led by Stern and Irgun and the more central Haganah fighting force. On March 10th, actually, of 1948, these objectives of relocating the native population were formalized in the fourth iteration of their plan, which they called Plan D, or Plan Delay, with a list of villages to be taken by the Haganah and each group, Irgun and Stern. If the villagers would not leave, they were to be shot. Identified sympathizers with the Arab resistance were specifically targeted by name for assassination. To quote from this document authored by David Ben-Gurion, quote, "These operations can be carried out in the following manner, either by destroying villages, by setting fire to them, by blowing them up, and by planting mines in their debris, and especially those population centers which are difficult to control continuously, or by mounting combing and control operations according to the following guidelines: encirclement of the villages and conducting a search inside them. In case of resistance, the armed forces must be wiped out and the population expelled outside the borders of the state." In accordance with this plan, Plan Nakjasan, I don't know how to say this, Nakshan, was initiated on April 1st against the western suburbs of Jerusalem, and then on April 9th, Deir Yassin was attacked, where the inhabitants were massacred. Women, men, and boys were lined up and shot. Small children were executed. In total, nearly 100 people were massacred. This massacre was reported in the New York Times at the time because a reporter had seen the result, and thus it became known around the world. It was described as an exception, but there were and would be other massacres. In fact, the exception of Deir Yassin was that it was widely reported. But it served the purpose of instilling fear in the neighboring villages. And on April 12th, Tiberias was attacked with bombs and bombardment, and when the town fell on April 18th, the population was expelled. Arab countries sent what troops they could to stop massacres and the taking of land, all the while urging the population to stay put. Strife increased, as did expulsions. By December of 1948, the UN resolved that all refugees wishing to return to their homes and live in peace should be allowed to do so, and that those choosing not to return should be compensated. It also reaffirmed the independent status of the city of Jerusalem. When the fighting ended in 1949, Israel now occupied 78% of Palestine, and nearly 500 villages had been depopulated, with over 700,000 refugees displaced. In May of 1949, Israel was admitted to the United Nations over the objections of Arab countries who noted that Israel had not implemented nor acknowledged its commitment to abiding by the earlier UN resolutions regarding return or the status of Jerusalem. Instead, as documented extensively in subsequent research, Israel set out to destroy the homes and buildings of those villages and to prevent return. And a new lie was concocted, that the fault for the refugee situation was their doing. It was said that they had voluntarily left, that they had urged the Arab countries had urged them to move aside so that they could attack Israel, which wished only to live in peace with its neighbors and on the land that the UN had given to them. But since the refugees had left voluntarily, and Israel, in defending itself, had happened to acquire more land, it was only fair that Israel keep it. Subsequent reviews of the contemporaneous broadcast, both by the BBC and by other Israeli publications and radio at the time, show clearly that all of the messaging to the Palestinian population was encouraging them to stay, not to leave. By this lie and distortion of history, Israel then and Israel now continues to deny any culpability for Palestinian dispossession. Israel continues today to take land and houses with impunity, having established the practice with no apparent consequence so long ago. So we gather today to remember these tragic events, to put a light on the truth of history, and to call on everyone, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Palestinian, Israeli, and American, to embrace justice, to seek peace, and to begin by acknowledging with integrity the Palestinian tragedy so that we can then begin reconciliation work together. I'm now going to ask Suhail Alabouni to come forward and begin reading the names for us. And as I said, I would ask you to come and place a flag on the map for each name that's read. And when we're done, we'll come back. But before we do that, I want to share a poem with you that will be read by Laura. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is not my poem, so it's really good though. It's called Everything in Our World Did Not Seem to Fit. Once they started invading us, taking our houses and trees, drawing lines, pushing us into tiny places. It wasn't a bargain or a deal or even a real war. To this day, they pretend it was. But it was something else. We were sorry what happened to them, but we had nothing to do with it. You don't think what was a little plot of land means till someone takes it and you can't go back. Your feet still want to walk there. Now you are drifting worse than homeless dust, very lost feeling. I cried even to think of our hallway, cool stone passage inside the door. Nothing would fit for years. They came with guns, uniforms, declarations. Life magazine said, it was surprising to find some Arabs still in their houses. Surprising? Where else would we be? Up in the hillsides, conversing with the mint and sheep, digging in dirt? Why was someone else's need for a home greater than our own need for our own homes we were already living in? No one has ever been able to explain this sufficiently, but they find a lot of other things to talk about. Thank you.
This list starts with acre district, منطقة عكا. عكا is the word for acre. The first name is عمقة. عرب السمنية. البصة. شويرح. التل. تربيخة. ام الفرج. خربة الطاقة. الطيري. ام عجرة. خربة صابوني.
الجورة، جسير، كرتيا، كوفخة، كوكبة، الخصاص، المسمية الكبيرة، المسمية الصغيرة، المحركة، نجد، نعيلية، قسطينة، السوافير الغربية، السوافير الشمالية، السوافير الشرقية، سمسم، سميل، تل الترمس، ياسور، أبو شوشة، خربة أم برج، زكريا، زيتة، زكرين،
جافا ديستريكت، العباسية، أبو كشك، بيت دجن، بيار عدس، فجة، الحرم، إجليل القبلية، إجليل الشمالية، الجماسين الغربي، الجماسين الشرقي، جريشة، كفر عانة، الخيرية،
اللجون، المزار، نورس, زرعين, now from Nazareth district, Indur, معلول, المجديل, صفورية, الرملة district, أبو الفضل, أبو شوشة, عجنجول, عاقر,
المنصورة، المخيزن، المزريعة، النعاني، النبيروبين، قطرة، قزازة، القباب، القبيبة، قولة، سجد، سلبيت، صرفند العمار، صرفند الخراب، صيدون، شحمة، شلتة، التينة،
فرعن، غبطية، غرابة، الحمراء، هراوي، حنين، الحسينية، جاحولة، الجاعونة، جب يوسف،
سعسع، الشوكة التحتة، الشونة، طيطبة، تليل، العلمانية، العريفية، اللويزية، اليردة، الظاهرة التحتة، الزنغرية، خربة زلفة.
If everyone would just come back up here a minute and gather around in a circle. So I'd like to do two things now. I'd like to just take a moment and everyone just reflect on this. And then when we're done, I'd like to invite anyone who would like to come up who is moved to make a comment, to take a minute and make a comment at an open mic. And then I'll have a few closing remarks after that. So let's just take a moment of silence. And I'm going to say amen to that. Thank you. So would anyone like to make a comment? We have a moment here for sharing feelings, thoughts, anything you'd like to say.
In 2003, I spent 3 months as a peace presence in Israel-Palestine. Some comments I heard, there were 2 journalists from South Africa who wanted to see the wall for themselves. They went to Kilkilia, totally surrounded by the wall with only 1 gate, if the soldiers will let them through. And their comment was, apartheid in South Africa was a Sunday school picnic compared to what the Palestinians are experiencing. We had a Jewish guide taking us through Jerusalem and the settlements, and her comment during that ride was, and now my government is building a wall, twice as high and 3 times as long as the Berlin Wall, and guess who's paying for it? The United States. The most significant comment I heard was from a Jewish woman from Jerusalem who said, we must move beyond the Holocaust. The abuse and oppression of the occupation is stripping the joy out of Judaism.
This old bell, I didn't do this intentionally. It was an old bell I found that I used on my ice cream cart that I had in Boulder, Colorado. But it occurs to me now, the fact that it sort of built on a Native American headdress may have some significance here, because it seems like that same delusional notion of manifest destiny that created a genocide in this land is also at work in Palestine, and may it be done with.
My name is Paul Renshaw from Mankato, the last 10 years before that the UK, where I worked on Israel-Palestine for churches in Britain and Ireland. In 2001, I took a delegation of church leaders to the Middle East with a week finishing up in the land between the river and the sea. And one of the experiences was to go to see a high-level official in the Israeli Foreign Ministry. I remember that as being a rather frigid experience. And then we went from that gentleman almost literally into the warm embrace of Hanan Ashrawi. It was an amazing contrast in cultural temperament. If you haven't yet looked at Hanan Ashrawi's speech recently that is featured on the Mondoist website, do so. It is really extraordinary. I stand here also to compliment NJP for this occasion. This is what happens in this part of Minnesota. You have made a unique contribution outside the Twin Cities over the last 10 years. I stand here also rather ashamed to be British, because the British Prime Minister said that this year, the centenary of the Balfour Declaration, is the time to celebrate that unfortunate development. So thank you for all that you're doing. It is a wonderful witness to peace and justice.
I want to tell you how heartwarming it is to see this group representing, looks like many countries and many ethnic groups. I have been working on this for justice for Palestine for 50 years. And it's been a long, long haul. But to see this group here today, it's grown every year. Thank you for coming, and keep spreading the news that Palestinians need justice too.
As we come to a close, I want to acknowledge that this is the 5th year we've done this ceremony. I find it meaningful and moving every time, and I appreciate your coming. This is the 10th year our group has been working on these issues. And the thing that I think matters the most is that we are aware of it, we can feel this pain and the depth of what happened here, but then we then go and do something about it, right? And what needs to be done about it as an American is to address American policy. This is a solution that needs to come from the area, but we are not an idle bystander here. We are an active participant. And that's where I think each of us as an American should begin, to change the view and the perspective and the actions of our government that intervenes in this issue, that intervened in that issue when it happened. When Israel was admitted to the United Nations, I was reading last night again the resolution and the comments by President Truman, where it says, Israel is being admitted as a peace-loving nation to the United Nations. This is after having immediately prior to that denied both culpability and their willingness to participate in the prior resolutions the year before on the status of Jerusalem or refugees. And that gap in reality persists to this day. We have much work to do. I thank you for coming. God bless.
There were 3 of us who got it started in the summer of 2007, and we started by putting on a movie in town that was shown in a few different locations, and then we decided to keep it going. We've had a lot of fairs and movies, speakers, events like you saw today, just to raise awareness of the Palestine issue. I was in the West Bank for a month in the summer of 2007, and I would say it was a life-changing experience. I was fortunate enough to travel throughout most parts of the West Bank. I did not go to Gaza. I saw some of Israel also, met some very nice Israeli people. So yeah, I very much latched onto this issue. It means a lot. I am interested in having more and more people know this side of history. And I find no better way than to put on a unique visual event. We are kind of unique in celebrating or observing the Nakba by doing a visual, almost like a theater thing where everybody can join in. So it's probably here to stay. We've done it, I think, 5 times, and it'll probably be every year in early May for Nakba Day.
Ruth Hansen.
Ruth, you're one of the founders of this event?
Yes, well, the event has been here for 5 years. NJP, Northfielders for Justice / Palestine, was organized 10 years ago. And I have been working for this cause for 50 years, since I first went to Israel in 1968.
So why is it important to you?
I have seen the suffering of the Palestinian people, and I realize what a wonderful heritage they have. They are excellent people. We get only the side of them put in the papers, calling them terrorists. I have yet to see one over there. I feel like it's not Paula. They are interested in education, interested in the arts, and I find them a delightful people with whom to visit.
I'm here today because I'm moved by the depth of this tragedy of Palestine and by the unfortunate misunderstandings and distortions that have been created over the years about it. I think it's important for all of us to understand that and to be able to accept that before we can move forward with reconciliation and really finding justice.
How are you personally affected by this ceremony?
Affected by the scale of the number of villages, of the extent of the stories of each of those villages, and how difficult it was on the day in which the soldiers of the army or the various groups came to them and forced them at gunpoint or killed people and made them leave. And I find that compelling in its magnitude.